What if the reason you cannot fully relax is not because you are doing life badly, but because your body no longer believes the danger is over? Not the kind of danger with teeth, not the kind that announces itself with sirens, smoke, or footsteps in the dark. I mean the quieter kind, the kind that hums, the kind that lives in your pocket, on your screens, in your unpaid bills, in the messages you have not answered, in the endless low-level feeling that something needs your attention right now. And because it is quiet, people underestimate it. They think urgency only counts when it is dramatic, when it looks like a crisis, when it has a headline, a diagnosis, a collapse. But most modern urgency does not arrive like that. It arrives like tabs open in the mind, like a body that will not soften, like a jaw that stays slightly clenched even when the room is silent, like checking your phone not because you want to, but because some part of you cannot bear not knowing, like sitting down to rest and feeling almost immediately that you should be doing something else. That is the kind of urgency I want to talk about, because millions of people are living inside it. Not once in a while, not after a particularly hard week, but as a baseline. A third of adults in Great Britain recently reported high anxiety, and the most commonly reported issues facing the UK were the cost of living, the NHS, and the economy. Mental Health UK's 2026 burnout report also found high or extreme pressure and stress remain widespread, with 1 in 5 workers taking time off sick because of stress-related poor mental health. And if you live inside enough pressure for long enough, something subtle begins to happen. You stop calling it pressure. You start calling it normal. You say things like, "I'm just tired lately," or "My mind never really switches off," or "That's just how I am," or "I can't sit still," or "I don't know why I'm so irritable." But beneath all of that is often something much simpler, a body that has learned to stay ready, because the body does not speak English. Not really. It does not understand emails, mortgages, social comparison, algorithmic overload, or the emotional weight of trying to hold yourself together in a world that rarely feels settled. It understands sensation, pattern, repetition, tone. And if the signals coming in are constant enough, sharp enough, uncertain enough, it begins to interpret life itself as an unfinished alarm. That matters, because stress is not just a thought. It is not just overthinking. It is not just a bad habit of mind. Official health guidance describes stress as the way the brain and body respond to challenge or demand. In that response, the body releases hormones that make you more alert and ready to act. The classic fight-or-flight response raises things like heart rate and blood pressure. NHS guidance also notes that stress can show up not only emotionally, but physically too. Through muscle pain, headaches, stomach issues, dizziness, racing thoughts, and feeling overwhelmed. So when someone says, "I know I'm safe, but I don't feel calm," that is not nonsense. That is not weakness. That is not them being dramatic. That is often the gap between the thinking mind and the listening body. Because the mind can know one thing, while the body is still preparing for another. And once you understand that, a lot of modern life starts to look different. You begin to see how strange this era really is. We are expected to absorb more information in a day than older generations sometimes encountered in weeks. We see people we do not know arguing about things we cannot control. We are pulled into emergencies that are not ours, expectations we did not agree to, timelines we cannot meet. Standards no human nervous system was built to carry with grace every hour of every day. The old image of danger was simple. A branch snaps in the forest. Something moves where nothing should move. The body surges, the senses sharpen. You act. Then it passes. There was a before, a peak, an after. Modern life often has no after. That is part of the problem. There is no real exhale at the end of it. The message comes through just as you sit down. The next headline lands before the first one has settled. Your phone glows on the table like a tiny artificial moon. And even when it is silent, it radiates possibility. Someone might need you. Something might have changed. You might be missing something important. You might be behind. That word alone has done enormous damage. Behind. Behind on work. Behind on life. Behind on healing. Behind on money. Behind on the version of yourself you thought you would be by now. And the body hears all of it as pressure. Not poetic pressure, not metaphorical pressure. Actual pressure, a squeeze, a narrowing, a command to mobilize. So people live like this for months, sometimes years, and then wonder why peace feels strange when it finally arrives. Why a quiet afternoon can feel eerie instead of nourishing. Why a free day can make them restless instead of grateful. Why rest sometimes feels like guilt in a softer outfit. It is because the system adapts. That is what bodies do. They adapt to cold. They adapt to heat. They adapt to rhythm. They adapt to chaos too. And if your body has spent long enough in vigilance, then vigilance starts to feel like competence. Busyness feels like safety. Hyper-awareness feels like responsibility. Scanning feels intelligent. Interrupting your own rest feels productive. A lot of people think they are failing at relaxation. But often, what is really happening is this. Their body has become more familiar with tension than with ease. And familiarity is powerful, even when it hurts, even when it exhausts you. Even when you secretly know this pace is eating parts of your life, you will never get back. There is something deeply sad about that. The number of people who sit in their own homes and still do not feel landed in them. The number of people whose bodies are physically on the sofa, while their nervous systems are still standing in a doorway, listening for the next thing. The number of people who have not truly rested in so long that they no longer remember what deep rest feels like. Not distraction, not collapsing. Not scrolling until the mind goes numb. I mean rest. The kind where the ribs loosen. The forehead softens. The room stops feeling like a place you have to manage. The future stops leaning over your shoulder. That kind of rest does not come easily to a body that has been taught the world is always about to ask something of it. And to be fair, the world usually is. That is what makes this conversation so difficult. Because people are not imagining it. The bills are real. The uncertainty is real. The overstimulation is real. The social pressure is real. The griefs people carry privately are real. This is not one of those conversations where I tell you the problem is all in your head. The answer is simply to think better thoughts. No. Sometimes your body is responding appropriately to an inappropriate environment. Sometimes the pressure is not invented, it is absorbed. Sometimes the issue is not that you are too sensitive. It is that the world has become very loud, and your body is still honest enough to register it. That honesty is not the enemy, but it does mean something important. If the body is taking life in as a chain of unfinished alarms, then eventually everything can begin to feel urgent, even things that are not. A text message, a glance, a tone of voice, a delay, a pile of washing, an unopened email, a conversation you need to have. A decision you have not made, the fact that someone has not replied, the fact that you forgot to buy something, the fact that you are sitting down while there is still more to do. And one by one these things stack, not always in the mind first, in the body. A little more tension in the shoulders, a little more shallow breathing, a little more irritability. A little less patience, a little more fatigue that somehow never turns into sleep. Then one day, someone says something tiny and you feel far too much. Or nothing much happens at all, and you still cannot settle. Or you wake up already tired, which is one of the loneliest feelings. Because it means you did not even get to begin the day clean. You started underwater. This is where people often become cruel to themselves. They call themselves lazy, weak, unfocused. Bad at coping, too much, too emotional, not disciplined enough. But if a body has been repeatedly taught to mobilize, then of course it struggles to melt. That is not a character flaw. That is conditioning. There is also something else modern life has done, and I do not think we talk about it enough. It has broken rhythm. Human beings are rhythmic creatures. We are not machines designed for permanent output. We are tidal. We are meant to have moments of effort, and moments of recovery, moments of stimulation, and moments of stillness, moments of engagement, and moments of withdrawal, in-breath, out-breath, wake, sleep, winter, spring, conversation, silence. But now, so many people live in one long interior afternoon. Not fully day, not fully night, not fully working, not fully resting, just suspended. Always somewhat reachable. Always somewhat responsible. Always somewhat behind. It is such an unnatural state. And because it is shared, people assume it must be healthy. That is one of the strangest things about collective dysregulation. When enough people are living in survival mode starts to look normal. Rushing looks admirable. Exhaustion looks ambitious, numbness looks maturity, detachment looks efficiency. And a person who wants a softer, slower, more regulated life can start to feel almost guilty for even wanting it. As if calm were indulgent, as if softness were weakness, as if the ability to be reached at all times were some kind of moral virtue. But there is nothing noble about burning through your own nervous system just to prove you can keep up with a pace that is slowly hollowing people out. And I think a lot of viewers already know this, not as a theory, as a feeling. They know because they have caught themselves reaching for their phone before they have even fully opened their eyes. They know because they have sat in beautiful weather with a body that still would not unclench. They know because they have gone away for a break and discovered that the mind packed itself in the suitcase and came too. They know because they have heard a notification sound in another room and felt their body react before their mind even decided whether it cared. That reaction matters. Because repeated stress is not just psychological theater, it has physiological consequences. Medline Plus notes that when stress becomes long-term, it may harm health, and burnout guidance describes long-term stress and constant pressure as core ingredients in physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. Again, that does not mean every stressed person is broken. It means the body keeps score in quieter ways than many people were taught to notice. In the jaw, in the gut, in the skin, in the appetite, in the fuse getting shorter, in the joy taking longer to arrive, in the way even simple tasks can begin to feel strangely heavy. And when that heaviness lingers, people often try to outrun it. More stimulation, more noise, more productivity, more caffeine, more scrolling, more things to fix, more things to buy, more self-improvement, more trying. But urgency does not always need more fuel. Sometimes it needs less input, less artificial demand, less constant exposure, less pretending that every signal deserves the same amount of your life force. Because that is part of the trap too. Modern systems flatten value. Everything arrives with the same brightness, the same ping, the same rectangular little box demanding your glance. A message from someone you love, a marketing email, bad news from across the world, a delivery update, a reminder, a bank notification, a clip of somebody shouting, a piece of beauty, a piece of grief, a piece of nonsense, all of it presented in one stream, and the body, faithful but ancient, keeps trying to work out what matters most. Imagine living beside a road where every vehicle, no matter what it carried, had to blast its horn before passing. That is what many people's inner world now feels like. No wonder the body stays alert. No wonder people say they are tired but wired. No wonder so many feel both numb and overstimulated at the same time. That combination is very modern and very telling, because numbness is not always absence. Sometimes numbness is overload with the volume turned down so the system can survive it. That is another reason this conversation matters. When a person has lived too long in activation, they do not always look panicked. Sometimes they look flat, detached, too tired to care properly, unable to find the right amount of feeling for anything because everything has been coming in too fast for too long. So if you have felt strange lately, it may not be because you are losing yourself. It may be because your body has been trying to protect you with the tools it has available, and those tools are old, beautifully old, the racing heart that once helped a human run, the sharpened attention that once scanned the horizon, the tightened muscles that once prepared the body to move quickly. The instinct to look for threat because, historically, spotting danger early often meant survival. The problem is not that the body is stupid. The problem is that it is sincere. It believes what it experiences repeatedly. And if what it experiences repeatedly is interruption, instability, uncertainty, comparison, noise, pressure, and unfinished demand, then of course it starts preparing for more of the same. That is not failure. That is learning. Which means something hopeful, too. If the body can learn urgency, it can also relearn safety. Not overnight, not through force, not by shaming yourself for being tired, not by treating your own nervous system like a badly behaved employee that needs stricter management. No. Usually, safety returns through repetition as well, through moments that are small enough for the body to trust. A slower breath you do not rush, a moment outside without needing to document it, a room with no competing sound, a hand on your chest long enough to remember you live there, A cup of tea drank without multitasking. An evening where not every silence is filled. A choice not to answer something immediately just because the world has trained you to think fast means good. These things sound tiny. But to a body that has been braced for a long time, tiny is exactly what can get through. Because giant declarations mean very little if the system still feels hunted. You cannot lecture a nervous system into peace. You have to show it, again and again, like coaxing a frightened animal from under a table. Not with noise, not with blame, with steadiness, with consistency, with enough gentleness that it begins to believe the room is different now. And maybe that is what this season is asking from so many people. Not perfection, not superhuman resilience, not another performance of coping. Maybe it is asking for discernment, to begin noticing what is actually urgent and what has only borrowed the costume of urgency. Those are not the same thing. A child in danger is urgent, a real emergency is urgent, a body needing immediate care is urgent. But not every message is urgent. Not every opinion is urgent. Not every update is urgent. Not every demand deserves front-row access to your bloodstream. That line is important, because when everything is treated like an emergency, genuine emergencies become harder to feel clearly. The signal gets muddy, the body gets exhausted, the soul gets crowded, and eventually a person can lose their sense of inner scale. They no longer know what deserves their energy and what merely knows how to grab it. That is why this is not just a mental health conversation. It is a spiritual one too, because where your attention goes, your life follows. What repeatedly enters the body begins to shape the atmosphere of the self. And if your atmosphere is permanently stormy, even beauty can struggle to land. You can stand in sunlight and still feel chaste. You can have a safe home and still not feel settled inside it. You can be loved and still feel on edge. Not because love failed, not because the sunlight was not real, but because the system carrying you has not yet caught up with the moment. That is why I think so many people are aching for something they cannot quite name, not just rest, return. Return to an inner pace that feels human. Return to a body that is not always scanning. Return to mornings that do not begin with impact. Return to evenings that feel like descent rather than collapse. Return to a self that is not constantly being tugged outward. And perhaps that begins with a new question. Not, how do I become more productive inside this pressure? Not, how do I harden myself enough to cope with all of it? Not even, how do I get back to who I used to be? Maybe the better question is this. What would help my body believe, even for a few moments, that the danger is over? That is a different question. A kinder one? A wiser one? Because it assumes you are not the problem to be solved. It assumes your system has reasons. It assumes the body is not sabotaging you, but speaking in the only language it knows. And once you hear that language, you begin to stop fighting yourself. You begin to notice when your shoulders rise, when your breath disappears, when your thoughts speed up, when a harmless task suddenly feels loaded, when your body is not reacting to the thing itself, but to the accumulation around it. That awareness is powerful. Not glamorous, not dramatic, but powerful. Because awareness creates a small gap. And inside that gap lives choice. The choice to pause before absorbing another signal. The choice to step outside instead of deeper into the scroll. The choice to delay a response instead of treating every interruption as sacred. The choice to speak to yourself like someone whose body has been carrying a lot, instead of like someone who should have handled it all better. And with enough of those choices, something beautiful begins to happen. The body starts to trust you. It starts to feel that there is, at last, someone home inside the house. Someone paying attention, someone listening, someone willing to protect its peace instead of constantly trading it away. That changes things. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not in a cinematic moment. Maybe not with one perfect morning where you finally wake up transformed. More likely it happens gradually. One unclenched jaw, one softer evening, one moment where you realize the room is quiet, and for once, your body has decided to join it. That is not a small thing. That is the beginning of return. So if everything has felt urgent lately, if your mind has been racing, if your body has felt tight and tired and somehow still unable to truly land, I do not think the answer is to shame yourself into becoming harder. I think the answer is to become more discerning. To remember that your nervous system is ancient, honest, and always listening. To remember that repeated signals become lived reality inside the body. To remember that peace is not laziness. Stillness is not failure. And rest is not something you earn only after becoming machine-like enough to survive the age. You are not here to live as a permanently activated response pattern. You are here to inhabit your life, and that life deserves at least some moments where the body is not preparing for impact. Some moments where the breath reaches the bottom of the lungs. Some moments where the future is not dragging at the hem of the present. Some moments where your own home, your own body, your own evening feel like places you are allowed to arrive in. So I want to leave you with the same question we opened with, because it matters even more now. What if the reason you cannot fully relax is not because you are doing life badly, but because your body no longer believes the danger is over? And if that is true, then maybe healing begins there, not in force, not in performance, not in pretending you are fine, but in teaching the body, slowly, steadily, truthfully. This moment is safe enough to soften in. This breath does not need to rush. This room is not asking anything from me right now. Not everything is urgent. Not everything gets to enter me. And I am allowed to come back to myself.